I know that I am prone to scrolling on social media all day. Whether that is TikTok or YouTube, doesn't really matter. The hours of watching become so mindless that at the end of it, not only do I have nothing to show for it, but I can't really even remember much of what I watched. Over the past couple years, I have been trying several different avenues to try and spend my free time more wisely, and being more meaningful with said time. When it comes to media consumption, which not only do I enjoy, but also have great access to, I think it is important to diversify the intake every day. In my house, the news is always playing. It even plays after everyone has gone to bed. I personally give the news about 15 to 20 minutes of my attention on a given day, but the background always stays on. And I'm not really one that enjoys rewatching something, and the news cycle is almost 100% of the time just rehashing the same points day in and day out until something notable happens. So, due to that, I don't really pay much attention anymore. But that becomes harder when it can be viewed anywhere. This comes from YouTube, TikTok, news alerts on my phone. It's practically inescapable. So what I've done to help limit the rewatching and rehashing is to branch out with media as a whole quite a lot. What that means is, when I'm at home, I keep my phone away when I can and try to focus on something else entirely. I first started with movies. I made a video talking about that a little while back, which I will link, but essentially I bought 100 DVDs to help occupy my time with. About 90% of them I'd never seen, so it was really refreshing having new content being pumped into my blood. I made it a habit to put a movie on the DVD player relatively often, to keep me off my phone and to get the news off the TV. Honestly, forcing myself to be off my phone helped a lot with my concentration and overall memory. Even years later, I can still remember some of those movies pretty clearly, despite it being years since I watched them. One really good example of this is Crank. When I first watched Crank with some friends a few years back, it was just another movie to us. But the premise of Crank involves Jason Statham's character needing to keep his adrenaline up to survive. So over the course of the movie, he's constantly doing either the most intense things or the stupidest things I've ever seen on a movie. Also, for whatever reason, they don't really clarify what it is he was infected with to have this happen. They just refer to it as the Beijing shit. It was just one of those movies that just blew away our expectations. In a similar sense, I also decided to do this with music. Instead of letting Spotify decide what I would like, or continue to listen to the news, I once again bought 100 CDs and played them every day in my car when going to school or work. Even though Spotify could pick stuff I was likely to like anyways, and usually did, I figured I needed to really branch out from those same genres I was used to. While in both circumstances, I dealt with a lot, and I do mean a lot, of bad media. Really boring movies and albums that I don't even remember at this point. But for every one bad, there were at least two that were somewhat interesting or extremely engaging. I also found that some things I thought I wouldn't like, I actually enjoyed quite a lot. Never did I think I was much of a country music fan, but I gave a Merle Haggard and an Alan Jackson CD a try and loved both. I found many new favorites and expanded my horizons way more than a Discover Weekly could have ever done on its own. My past tastes wouldn't have given Katie Lang a chance, nor Collective Soul a listen, but due to those being the CDs I had in my car, I was given an opportunity to like them. And another just for fun, oh man, Dave Matthews Band sucks. I can't tell you how much I was disappointed by their music. I had heard some people talk about how much they liked their music, so I was excited when I ended up getting some of their CDs. But not only did I get some albums, I got over 7 of them. And every single album song, whatever, sounds the same. When it was time to listen to one of those CDs in my car, I was fuming. The frequency of them being in my car made a few weeks really bad. But all feelings aside, without the CDs giving me a change of pace, I wouldn't know for certain that I do not like their music. And with some pretty good successes in DVDs and CDs, I thought I should go a little deeper on something I haven't mentioned yet. That is anime. For most of my young life, I have not been an anime fan. Never really watched it growing up. The only exception was Pokemon on occasion. I grew up more with shows like SpongeBob, Jimmy Neutron, or The Fairly OddParents. So when I got to high school, the animated shows I was watching were still stemming from American entertainment. So the shows like Rick and Morty or American Dad. But alongside those shows, I saw a meme. And literally one of my first thoughts when watching that meme take off was, wow, that animation actually looks really nice. And so I decided to look into Crunchyroll and what anime could offer. But as anime was still not popular like it is now, I kinda kept what I watched to myself. What I did watch was usually just something with an interesting cover or title, as I wasn't the type to try and find good recommendations on my own. I will say later on I did watch shows such as Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, Cowboy Bebop, and Evangelion, so I eventually became sort of cultured on the subject. But most things I heard about more often was the newer shows. But just since something is new, it doesn't automatically make it good. And you can really find that in all industries, to be honest. But back on point, after going through the CDs and DVDs and finding some gems, I started looking to see if I can get some anime DVDs or Blu-rays for cheap. I ended up finding a reseller who had bought a collection from someone and was parting it out. So we messaged back and forth until we settled on a decent price for everything. If I remember correctly, I think I got most of it for about $2 a piece. And within that collection, there were plenty of complete shows that I never heard of before, or even seen discussed anytime recently. Some of these include Shuffle, Dead Leaves, Happy Lesson, Kamichu, Wandaba Style, Photon, and most importantly, K-On! Now, K-On! Isn't some underground, unheard of anime. It is one of the most recognizable music animes out there. But due to licensing, it is not easily watchable. Instead of being on Crunchyroll like most everything else, it's on Hulu, or at least it was at some point. So having that DVD was really helpful in me finding it and watching it in the first place. Despite being a really important anime for me to watch and enjoy at the time, it also helped prove to myself that having physical copies of media that I enjoy is important. Netflix, as everyone knows, used to be the home of The Office and some really great shows and movies. But just like that, another company and service can swoop in and buy out the rights, taking it away from viewers on that platform. Despite anime being as popular as it is now, it can still be really difficult to track down and consistently watch certain shows, at least legally. Back on K-On! Though, my main point is despite how recognizable it is now, and how most everyone who has seen late 2000s anime has seen it, if you are a newer fan of something, it most likely means there are some classics that are still worth seeing. It can be really beneficial to go back and watch older anime, as some of their stories really hold up well, and some can be really unique and weird too. Especially if you did not grow up on those and don't realize that you missed out. K-On! Is one of my favorites ever. And it only could have been that way if I was able to get a hold of it physically, as the likelihood of seeking it out specifically was essentially none. In another physical sense, I really prefer to read with a book in my hands versus just getting a file on my computer, and I used to not really care for reading at all. It was always a chore in school and made me not really want to do it for leisure. Years later, and without any more assigned reading to do, I finally wanted to get back into it. I did so by starting with something familiar, but different. So I started reading manga. That way it was shorter and had visuals to go along with it. One of the first series I finished that I really enjoyed, funny enough, was the K-On! Manga. It reads like a comic strip more than normal manga, but it was just as charming as the show was. There's also more content here that takes place after the series ends, which includes the continuation of the band's lives in college as well as the others still left in high school. Reading this not too long after watching the series helped me get a lot back into reading, honestly. After that, there were some audiobooks I listened to here and there as well, most notably being the Bryan Cranston autobiography, A Life in Parts, and it is so good. You can find it on Spotify at the moment, and it is such a great listen as it's read by Bryan Cranston himself. Honestly, it is one of the best biographies I have ever read or listened to. Lastly, in terms of books, is one I read earlier this year. It is called Kill Red, a part in the Wolf Stockburn Railroad Detective series. I think I finished that book in about a month with a chapter a day. The book itself was pretty meh, as the main characters are constantly referring to each other by different names, and even in action the names switch. For example, the main character, Wolf, is referred to as Detective, Railroad Dick, Stockburn, and a few others depending on the characters talking to him. It was a lot more disorienting than it should have been. But reading a pretty mid book was honestly really good for building up my attention span and making sure I was paying attention to what I was reading altogether. Although I haven't read any other novels since then, I'm pretty confident that I won't have any issues getting invested in the next one I pick up. Outside film, anime, music, etc., my media consumption also applies to video games. I play a lot of games. For the longest time, I was pretty much playing only multiplayer stuff with friends. I played a bunch of Call of Duty, Destiny, and Overwatch. Each of those titles are practically endless. You play as much as you want to play. There is no definitive ending. But after so long, just like the news, it's just all the same. Late into high school, I was getting a bit tired of the cycle. Play Destiny when the weekly reset happens, fill the weekdays with COD Zombies and Overwatch, and then end the weekend back on Destiny for PvP with friends. I think that had been the cycle for well over a year straight. One day, one of my friends recommended the game BioShock to me. I don't remember why that was the case, and let alone why I was inclined to try, but playing through the original BioShock for the first time is a trip. That game blind, masterpiece. The experience that I had with the story in my initial playthrough altered some of my brain chemicals. I realized that there was way more to gaming than just to play online with people for socializing. There were stories, worlds, heartbreaks, everything and anything. No longer was I getting angry at Overwatch teammates, but instead I was saving wildlife, playing with cats, solving puzzles and nightmares, doing stupid challenges and swing games, solving murder mysteries and fighting shadows, etc., etc. My point is that even with something as seemingly shallow as video games, there is a lot more to explore with new titles rather than sticking with the same old stuff. The single player experience is something timeless and can really be enjoyed by anyone at any time. The only real thing you have to have is the game and a way to play it. Not needing others to fill up a lobby or forced to work together makes gaming a lot more casual and more enjoyable, honestly. Repetitive media consumption doesn't challenge your brain. If anything, it just turns it into mush. If you're on a routine of waking up, going to work or school, and then coming home and hopping on COD or League or whatever, you will not be able to really feel a coherent passage of time. There won't be aspects of daily life that you can use to catalog what you did in certain weeks or months. Several years from now, you won't remember sitting in front of the TV or computer watching Friends for the third time. But you may, just maybe, remember that 12-episode series that you gave a chance on instead of retreating into habit. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what media you consume or enjoy. Maybe you do like playing sweaty games of competitive every night for weeks and weeks straight, but try to remember that there is more out there that you can experience without even leaving your house. A lot of times all it takes is just switching tabs from YouTube or Twitch to something different to make a difference.